Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're joining us here at Web3 Warriors. Welcome to episode 14, featuring Shilo and Art of Healing collection. Today, we're going to be talking about Web3 and wellness, a very important conversation as we are continuing to build out this Web3 space and build amazing projects on the blockchain. Welcome to Web3 Warriors, where we talk about all things creator and blockchain and Web3 related, so including the metaverse, including NFTs, and really just highlighting what's possible on the blockchain and with this direct peer-to-peer economy that we're building here on the blockchain, and really specifically the idea that anyone who has a creative venture, project, or even just some amazing art that you've been working on, you have an opportunity now with the blockchain, with Web3, to really put your work out in a new environment where you can get compensated almost 100%, much more compensation than a lot of the traditional space that you would get. And so we're really trying to just help show the power with Web3 and show how creators can take full advantage of this new space and really push back against a lot of the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, or FUD, as a lot of people in the space call it, about NFTs and about the economy that's really building on the blockchain here. Because unfortunately, with a lot of the perceptions around blockchain and perceptions around NFTs, it's a lot of financial manipulation, a lot of, trying to just make it big and get rich right away. And in a lot of that conversation, unfortunately, the health and well-being of the artist gets lost first and foremost. But even more importantly is the actual benefits of the overall market are kind of lost in the constant kind of focus on everybody getting rich and everybody making it, and we're all going to make it. WAGMI is a big slogan in the space, and I don't disagree with the idea that in our own way we can all make it, and that Web3 does give you the opportunity to really build amazing projects and allow to build communities without any interruption. And with that, in that vein, yes, we can all make it, but what does making it look like to everybody, And I think that the conversation around, expectations and people coming into the space with some sky high expectations because they've seen other people, make it big and get really rich off of their projects. If they're not getting that success, in the first 6 months, they start to think that, oh, well, this doesn't work for me, or maybe it's not meant for me. But I think it's important to realize that in Web3, while it is radically different in a lot of very interesting and exciting ways, when it comes down to it, you're still an artist trying to show the world, what you're creating, and you're trying to find new community members or collectors, however you want to view them, or just fans, supporters. There's a lot of different ways to look at that conversation, but generally it's going to take time, and I think it's an important lesson to learn as people are getting into the Web3 space with a lot of really lofty expectations. Like I say, it's important to realize, it's still one person to one person, that peer-to-peer connection requires you as an artist selling directly to a supporter or a fan or, whatever the case may be. And so that still takes time. And of course, some people, like maybe a Gary Vaynerchuk, for example, can come into this space having been, this amazing rock star in the social media space. And so it's completely in line with what Web3 offers and NFTs. And he can just bring his whole community over and find amazing success and make money hand over fist. And now he's a big influencer who can help blow up other projects, for example. So not everybody's Gary V, So it's an important thing to just think of when you're considering entering the Web3 space, and really just be realistic and realize that it is still a community-based kind of platform, and it's also only 1% or even a fraction of 1% of your average people who are online. So, just because you might have had some success on Instagram, or you might have tens of thousands of followers on Instagram, when you jump into Web3, it doesn't mean that that's all going to translate and those people are going to follow you onto the blockchain and you're going to find big success. You might still have to start out small and lower your expectations depending on what you're coming into the space with. So I just wanted to kind of set the tone of the conversation today when we're looking at Web3 and wellness. And we have an amazing guest with us here today, Shilo, who has some experience with wellness and the mental health conversation. I know she's not too huge on that phrasing of mental health, and maybe we can talk about that as well, just as far as some of the perceptions and narrative that is around the space as well. But I just think it's important as we look into this that people know, to take time and to put your self-care first, and to really just think about, what is it that you want to get out of Web3? What are you bringing to the space, and what are you hoping to get out of the space before you even, just jump in with both feet, hoping to sell your NFTs right away. Take the time to really lay it out and have a strategy. And to that end, I've heard some really interesting perspectives from Shilo and from others in the NFT community about wellness and mental health, and really being able to not only put self-care first, but actually help people in the space, and how your art can actually help people start conversations that maybe they hadn't thought of before, and can actually, inspire others to be more comfortable with their own well-being and mental wellness, really, and really spark conversations that haven't been, as maybe they're a little taboo in the real world, or maybe they're just shoved to the side, IRL. But in blockchain, you actually have the ability to not only highlight these topics, but build entire communities around the topics and around trying to help other people. So it's a really exciting opportunity. And with that, I would love to hear more from Shilo, who is actively working on something along those lines, which we will get into. So Shilo, I want to thank you very much for joining us here on Web3 Warriors. And maybe to start out, you can just share a little bit about your background, how you got into Web3, and maybe any artistic background that you had prior to having all this amazing art on the blockchain, including your Art of Healing collection here. So welcome, Shilo. How are you doing?
Hey.
Good.
Thanks for having me first. All right. So about me. Let's start NFT wise, because I guess it's been quite the journey. I, along with many other people during COVID, was trying to figure out another means of trying to get work out there, specifically my artwork. Had an amazing person onboard me in October 2021, which is pretty recent. And I did make the mistake of thinking right away that I'm gonna put all my art out there and it's gonna be successful and I'll be able to figure it out from there. And coming into the space and realizing that this is like anything else. It's hard work and constant connection and needing to build that up over time to be able to get that success, to get your pieces, your artwork to be seen and known and eventually collected. So that's like the Web3 part one. Then along with it, as I came into Web3, and I was like, wow, this is like this amazing space where people have this new, I guess, opportunity to have these conversations and connections that's a little different than Web 2. It felt like Web 2 is more about people having a microphone, and Web 3 feels more like people having a conversation.
Oh, I like it.
Yeah. So instead of just posting something and then or doing these lives and people are just participating, it felt much more like a conversation. And I've had in my head for a long time to try to do this social good project that I wasn't thinking Web3 because I didn't even know what Web3, but it was something that I had in my head, something related to therapy and getting people help in terms of funding for therapy, because it's something that's like a pet peeve of mine. And right as I came in the beginning, I was like, wow, this might be a really good space to combine what I want to do, artwork and being able to do the social good project. I remember being in a room with our mutual friends, Liana and Rami, were doing a room about social good project, like right when I came in. And I remember sending Liana a message like, oh, I want to do this project about helping people get funding for therapy. But then, how these things are, the art came and I was trying to figure out how to make a collection, like a PFP collection, because like the first month I'm going to have a PFP collection.
Of course.
All the mistakes that you kind of make, which I think people should make the mistake.
So I just want to highlight that quickly. PFP being the profile picture collection, and people come into the space thinking that's what's expected, right? So right. You were considering doing a generative profile picture collection.
And I started with that, and I'm not backing down. I have plans to finish with that, but it's probably not the best thing to start with until you get the feel of what the space is all around
Mhm.
you is like what's going on, who are the people, what's selling, what's like, just to get a sense of like reading the room of what Web3 looks like.
Yeah,
And
I'd
there's
agree.
so many rooms, right? There's so many corners of Web3. Like
Yeah,
the
it's
one
just
that
like
I came into
it's
is
like the
one
internet,
part,
right?
right?
It's just the new internet.
Yes, I know, but it's new conversations because it's not
Mhm.
like I'm just following new people on TikTok, you know what I
Right,
mean? And
right.
liking their content. It's like I'm having conversations with people, you get to know the vibe of the people, and then all of a sudden you find like, oh, there's other people like in Web3 and they're doing other things. And like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I like that you touched on the fact that there's more two-way conversation in Web3. I think that's a really interesting point that I don't think we've really highlighted here yet on Web3 Warriors. So how do you think that has differed? Like obviously, in the Web2 traditional social media, you get your influencers and look at me, and the like and repost culture. So how does that differ in Web3, do you think? And is it more healthy, maybe more important to the
Yeah.
topic of our podcast?
Yes, it is. I definitely think it's a huge benefit because when people are just like in their 5 seconds or that you have to grab somebody's attention or less, trying to get followers or get engagement and all that, it's not a conversation. It's a great tool if you want to get a message out, like let's say the Me Too movement or something. It's a message that has been broadcasted, but it's a broadcasting tool. And I find like Web3 is like understanding like the self-sovereignty together with community, right?
Most
That's
definitely.
what it's all about. It's like, what am I as part of this whole blockchain? I don't know if
With your
it's too much.
contribution on the blockchain, right? And you feel almost like a pressure to be like, okay, we're building for something more than myself.
Yes.
So coming from, you said you had a bit of a therapist background then, prior to Web3, or?
Yes, I want to like make this really clear. I'm not a therapist.
Right.
I'm just a therapy goer. I I have just a really good experience with my own therapy and my own history and trauma. So I am by no means an authority on this topic at all. I just feel really strongly about it because I know how much it helped me. And I belong to different groups of people that have a hard time getting access of care that's on the same level that I have because they can't afford it. And it's very hard to get that kind of level of therapy without the right insurance or if you don't pay out of pocket. And I feel like that's not fair. It shouldn't be the case that people should have to be on a certain level, like it should be a luxury to get that kind of help. And nobody asked to need that help to begin with, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think,
It's just,
especially it depends on your, like, well, even in America, I think it's state by state. And like in Canada, we have some therapy is covered and other therapy is not covered. So it's kind of case by case. But yeah, definitely, it can
and
get
I,
expensive for sure. And then,
yeah,
yeah, if you're
all
needing,
over the world, all
yeah,
over the world.
it is. It's unreasonable. Hopefully that's changing though. So when looking at your Art of Healing collection, right, and the potential to really start conversations, and it's really cool kind of emotional pieces that you touch on in here. So let's looking at the co-consciousness, for example. I really like that piece. But just in general, what are you trying to relay with the Art of Healing collection? Maybe you can start with this, be specific, or just in general.
Okay. So, uh, so I don't go about the art thinking like when I create it, thinking, what am I going to relay to the audience? What
Mm.
am I trying to say here to somebody else? I really let the art kind of pour out of me as a reaction or a response to where I'm at in like my own healing journey. And then that becomes like a conversation starter. So co-consciousness is like part of three. There's the cooperation, co-consciousness, and communication, which is a big thing in like my healing journey of learning how to have that kind of mindset with myself, like being co-conscious with my all myself and all the parts of myself. I don't know if that makes any sense,
Yeah, I think it makes sense.
but
It's just, coming to terms, right? And putting yourself first, maybe.
yeah, but it's like, who's myself? Like understanding what that is and what do we need and what do I need and what do we all as humans need and where are we hurting and how can we get the support for those places so that we show up to be better people in this world?
I love
So
it.
I guess the conversation is really how can we change the world? I really genuinely feel like if people did the work on themselves, it's a really good place to start.
And art has the potential to change the world. I really like this cooperation piece. I get some blockchain vibes from this.
Uh,
So the people kind of holding
yeah,
each other together, helping one guy up.
yeah.
Yeah,
I love that too because I think like when we work with ourselves, it becomes like a microcosm to understanding how to work with other people and then how to work with greater systems. So it really is all about the blockchain because the blockchain is kind of the system that we need to learn how to work with, right?
yeah, for sure. And I mean, I know even just myself, like I've been a pretty, I don't know, I like my solitude, you could say, you know, and with just the Web3 space, and obviously I'm hosting this podcast talking to amazing creators every week. And so I'm, you know, definitely out of my shell a little bit more. But I feel like you can't really, take full advantage or get the full Web3 experience without really like meeting people and hearing from people and talking to people, and plugging in different communities. Like I can't even say the amount of interesting NFT drops I've missed out on just because I tuned out of a certain Discord channel at the wrong time, you know? And it's like, it's funny how much they reward people just for being present, you know, just for being there and at the right time, right place. And you get dropped an NFT that ends up being worth, you know, hundreds or thousands of dollars down the road. So it's really cool. But more importantly than even just the monetary value is the fact that, like you say, you get that camaraderie, you get cooperation, as this piece says, and really being able to share your thoughts and bounce ideas off of people in a brand new kind of way. Or maybe it's not new to some people. Like I look at Discord, for example. I had a Discord channel. I've been using Discord as a gamer for quite a while. And so that kind of, in some sense, it gave you that peer-to-peer communication. It gave you that community building opportunity, but you just didn't have that financial monetary side of it, right? Whereas now it's like everything we're building in Discord, we can actually go out and put on the blockchain and then sell to people. And it's all direct peer-to-peer, you know. We don't have to worry about, hey, can we get monetized on YouTube and then maybe make some, you know, fractions of a dollar on all of the views that we get, you know. And it's such a longer process. Instead, it's like we can put those videos right on the blockchain and just try to like sell them to certain communities that might find it interesting, right? How do
Well,
you see that changing?
you touched on two really good points. You touched on the FOMO, the fear of missing out point, because you're like, I missed out on the conversation. Now I missed out on the NFT, which I feel like is such an important piece in this space because you
Mm-hmm.
can't be everywhere every time.
Exactly. That's very
And I
important.
love that you're talking about the whole peer-to-peer thing because really the Discord feels like it's just the platform for the conversations to happen, but the real stuff happens when you actually get to know the people, right? It's really about peer to peer. It's like in actuality, that's what makes the whole Web3 to me feel like Web3, right?
That is definitely it. And again, getting back to that question, contrasting that to maybe the traditional social medias and kind of monetizing your quote unquote influence. You know, how do you see Web3 maybe helping us evolve past that? Or do you think that it's going to kind of clash and force, you know, that traditional, I would say, kind of toxic relationship to change? Or do you think that that's going to be still, you know, the influencer culture, and you know, you don't see that going away anytime soon? Or do you see that there's going to be an
I wish
evolution?
we could say that Web3 is not that space, but obviously whatever happens in the world is going to be reflected in any space. Whereas this is not a magical welcome home, everything's happily ever after space.
Right.
There is still that concept of people being influencers and the ones speaking, and even the fact that people went from Clubhouse to Twitter Spaces where less people are on stage, so people are more being talked at, and then instead of
Yeah.
conversation is a part of that it's a little bit moving in that direction of like, which art do we buy? Like the one the influencer said is cool versus what do I see is cool. You know what I mean?
I got that
So there
vibe
is,
from Twitter. I'm glad you did too. But you know, apparently most people think Twitter's the cool place to be now. I still like Clubhouse, but
yeah, well, that's a big deal. It's a big deal to feel like you're being spoken at versus being able to join the conversation.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you have opportunities on Twitter Spaces, but to your point, you know, it's so much more influencer heavy. It's so much, I don't know. I just think it's pretty shill heavy, really. A little
Yeah.
less communication, or a little less community, and more shilling and trying to get that, you know, to the moon
Right.
NFT, and a lot of over promising and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
But I do want to say that there is still these magical pockets of conversation happening throughout Web3 that I have not seen anywhere else or had not had access to. It almost feels like the old like boardrooms where people would have the conversations of what's next in the world.
Mm-hmm.
To me, Web3, I've had these amazing conversations that are still rocking my mind of like, wow, like when do I get to have a conversation with these many like-minded people that want to do this amazing thing together?
That's
It's
just
not
it.
something that we had opportunity to do before. At least I didn't have access to those kind of conversations in those closed door rooms. This is like everybody has access. If you want to find those pockets of those conversations happening and you want to find projects to be involved in that are part of those conversations, there's room for that. You just have to keep looking until you find the ones that resonate with you. And if not, build your own.
No doubt. And
Create this
yeah,
conversation.
finding those like-minded communities, it's almost like Web3 has given you actual incentive to go out and find your tribe, right? It's like once you find your tribe, then you can build with your tribe, and then your tribe might build something that resonates with other tribes or other people, and then it's just like a network effect, you know?
I love that. I love that. That's such a good way. I'm seeing visually what you're explaining, but it's a good way of describing it.
Cool. Well, that's what we're here for. We're trying to help with the education, because a lot of people aren't seeing this side of Web3. You know, they're just hearing the NFTs and the FOMO, and not thinking about the community and the peer-to-peer economy, you know, and being able to support someone directly without any interference. I want to do a quick plug for the Twitch. Anybody watching us in the Twitch chat, thank you for joining us. If you're new, please smash that follow. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask questions in the chat. That's what we're doing live shows for. We wanted to allow people in the Twitch community to drop in, ask any questions. If you have no idea what Web3 is, that's okay as well. We're here for any onboarding questions as well. But really, we're just trying to help show the potential of the space and push a counter narrative to, I think, a lot of the more money focused and less productive elements of the NFT space. So yeah, I liked what you were saying about, really incentivizing community building. And to that end, maybe you can share a little bit of your other project, unless you want to speak a bit more on the Art of Healing project. But I am very curious about your collective that you're working on. I believe it's the Held Collective, which is very in line with using NFTs and art to heal and, like you say, increase access to therapy. So yeah, any thoughts on that you'd like to share?
Yeah, it's on my mind 24/7. So yes, I have lots
Nice.
yeah. But I did a fellowship for 8 weeks where I kind of took the idea in my head and was able to put it into like a roadmap, and this is what it looks like, and how are we going to figure this out? So I'm 2 weeks out of the 8-week fellowship, so I feel like after the 8 weeks of really intense working on this all the time, I kind of talk about wellness, right? I kind of fell into this like, oh my God. I just like needed to take that breather of like, just like take a deep breath so I could be able to put myself into doing this again. So like Monday, my day is already starting full of meetings and it's like back to work. But I did take 2 weeks in between to kind of like let things percolate, let things settle. But basically the project is, though I say the project cement is still wet because it hasn't been completely formed yet. It's still within the first 2 months of building it, and we have amazing plans for it. But as I have conversations with people and more people join the conversation, it gets better and bigger every time somebody else adds pieces to it. So we have a 3-part, I guess it's broken into 3 parts, the Held Collective. The first part is being the part of making spaces for those conversations to happen. Talk about conversations and how I love the fact that we could create these conversations. Let's talk about healing. Let's talk about therapy. Let's talk about what it means to make this world a better place. Let's have all these conversations. And I have lots of people trying to help me figure out how to make this collaborative art happen within this conversation that can be made into NFTs as these conversations happen. Like, how do we stack some sort of art of the people in this collective having the conversation, and is the conversation based on a syllabus or not? There's a lot of pieces there that are still complicated and need to be kind of parsed out. Then there's the funding piece of like trying to get funding for people that need access to therapy. And
for sure. And do you envision the NFTs helping to fund that essentially?
Yeah, and that's the third piece.
Right.
Yes.
And so when you said there's 3 main areas, sorry, highlight those 3 areas again. So it's under the Held Collective.
under the Health Collective is the healing spaces where the conversations are happening, the funding for therapy, and then the platform for art, which is where we get either donated NFTs, create NFTs together as a collective, or get art from outside the NFT world to be sold to go into the pool for the funding for therapy.
Ah, I like it. I like it. So the healing spaces, you would maybe say, is the kind of priority, right? Like community-based healing, right? Get everyone in, have these good conversations, necessary conversations, and then the actual access to therapy. I don't know. Is that a result of the conversations you're having, or it's more on like a person by person? If you think you need it, make the request,
Right.
and then
I do believe at a certain point, like going back to what I said, how I don't like the word mental health. And again, I'm not a mental health professional, but it feels like it's much more than that. Like there's so many rooms that crop up in Web3 about mental health. And I sometimes question, do they really help? Right?
Okay.
Are they really helping our mental health? Because in the end of the day, what you said, peer to peer, what's the most helpful is when you actually have connection with real people and you make those connections. Those are the most, they resonate for me at least the most, and they help the most along with my healing journey, I like to say, instead of mental, because it's not just mental, it's my whole
Right.
well-being, right?
Full
So
wellness.
exactly, the conversation, sometimes if the conversation is too big and you're not a part of it and you don't feel connected to someone in the conversation, it's not enough. But so
I like
trying to
that.
make those conversations happen where people are seen in the conversation. But the therapy piece is important to me because at some point, sometimes it doesn't help. Like we can make as many Web3 spaces or metaverse mental health spaces, but sometimes you need a little bit extra care for somebody that was trained to be able to help you get there. And I feel like that's a truth. That is the way that the world is built right now. Our society is built that there is just some people that can do that for us. And if you need that kind of help beyond what a support in a Web3 space could give you, then you should be able to have access to that.
Yeah, I love it. That's really interesting. And so, do you envision this community being largely based on Discord to start, or are you looking to maybe have anything in the metaverse, or any thoughts that far yet? As far as like, where are you gonna have those healing spaces hosted?
Yeah, so I actually did not think that Discord might be a good place for it because I don't want it to be that impersonal. I wanted
Mm,
it to be something that's like maybe Discord is just used to say when the Zoom meetings are happening because I feel like the connection piece is one of the most important pieces of this, especially if you want to create these conversations and art together. It's all about the connection and less about like who's aping in on this conversation.
right, right. That's cool. That's cool. So maybe just straight Zoom conversations. Do you have any
Sure.
thoughts? Any thoughts on the metaverse? I feel like this could be a project that, I mean, the metaverse has a little bit of a hurdle as far as cost to actually get your own lot. But there's other options too. You can actually create free spaces like in Crypto Voxels. But have you thought about, having a kind of metaverse extension or home for the Held Collective?
I haven't thought of that, but I have thought of having a held collective gallery,
Mm.
which is kind of,
Yeah.
I guess it would have the space for people to hang out, but it would be more like in real life gallery showings and metaverse gallery showings for the NFT collection that will eventually become bigger and bigger from the art that we collect that goes towards the collective.
And to your point about mental health, I hate to use the word trendy because I think it's still an important conversation, although maybe limited in your point. Whole body wellness is more important for sure. But do you think that because it is trendy, I would hope that there is a lot of maybe money or even just goodwill out there for a project like this. And obviously you've got some interesting connections with sorry, what was the group called that you're working with there again?
So I did the fellowship that I did was with Kernel.
With Colonel, right?
It's a Gitcoin project.
Mm.
Gitcoin is something that helps good, like social good projects get funding.
Yeah, so through Kernel, that, I mean, you've already got a little bit of that initial support, right? Have you
Yeah.
have you been kind of talking to the NFT community more broadly about the Held Collective, and is there a lot of goodwill out there? Like, I feel like, especially when you're looking at that specific being able to fund people's therapy, you need a little bit of I don't know, I guess a chest, right? You need a decent amount of funding, even maybe outside of your art. Like, you wouldn't want to rely solely on your art for that, right? So
It's
is there
definitely not
goodwill
just
out there for
mine.
that? Hmm.
Yeah, anybody that I talk to is like, sure, I would donate a piece. Like some great people have offered to donate a piece towards
Nice.
the Health Collective, And to your point, it's not enough. Like even if unless this NFT thing takes off, and it's a lot because therapy is so expensive, and we want to be able to help as many people as possible. There's other ways and means that we have in the roadmap of getting funding versus via grants, and then in real life, so government grants and bringing brands on board onto Web3. There's a lot of ideas in motion to try to get funding towards the project.
Right.
The NFT thing is just like the biggest piece right now, but there's plans for many more things.
Cool. I was trying to get your Held Collective graphic up on my screen, but it glitched out, so that's okay. Do you have a website or anything yet, or that's under construction still?
That's being worked on right now, okay. But there's the deck is on my Shilo.art website for now, like as a temporary place if somebody wants to see it. And I'm always happy to talk about it. So if anybody wants me to blab more about it, I'm always happy to have that conversation.
Hey, well, we're happy to hear as much as you'd like to share today. So Shilo.art, that's cool. Did you bought that URL, the .art URL? Nice. That was a good play. Cool. So yeah, I'm so fascinated by the Held Collective. My mind goes in like 5 different directions. Just the potential. I can't help but go to the metaverse because I feel like as a gamer, like I've escaped to the digital space before. And if there was a space in the digital world that was actually expressly there to help me, I think that would be a very welcome opportunity. And you probably get a lot of younger people seeing that as an easy option who maybe don't want the stigma. Unfortunately, still some stigma around, going to therapy, and don't want to, or just haven't fully come to terms with maybe where they're at wellness wise. I feel like going into the digital space and having such a healthy conversation is a really cool opportunity. I don't know. Are you targeting a specific age group, or I don't know. Yeah, my mind's going in a lot of different spaces.
Yeah, I love that because those conversations for me actually inform what the next steps are. Like, who should I talk to about that, or like what goes next? Like, how is this going to be built? But these are great conversations and great things to put into my head, even though I don't have the answers. In terms of like age-wise, there's a lot of people that were like, I live in New York City, so they said like start this on the ground in New York City and try to get people in New York City to help first. But I've started doing it that way, and I found it much harder than actually starting with Web3 people, because it's so much easier to get people that are already onboarded and need the help to get the help than trying to onboard and get people that need the help on to first Web3 and then get them the help they need. So just to have kind of the first part of the roadmap done once, at least, like round one done once, it's going to start with people in Web3, and the age range, as you know, ranges. There's a lot of young people, but for the most part, it's going to be people in their 20s, 30s, 40s.
Yeah, most definitely.
Maybe, you know what I mean? That's like...
Well, you touched on a really important topic there, right? Which I think I alluded to earlier when I was talking about it being like a fraction of 1% of the general population that even understands what Web3 or NFTs are about. So when you speak to your everyday New Yorker, obviously they understand the importance of therapy, and maybe you would lead with helping people get therapy. But when you talk about it being a Web3 project or an NFT project, what's the general feedback that you get?
Well, New York City is pretty like out there. There has been like books in display in the biggest bookstores about NFTs. I mean, NFT NYC was here and it was buzzing. And maybe I'm surrounded by people that like every time I go meet with a friend and there's somebody that's doing something in Web3, it's like, oh, you too? Like even like my doctor was like, oh yeah, my husband bought a mutant ape, and I was like, that is hilarious.
Wow.
Everybody seems to know something about Web3 when you're walking around, so it's not that hard, but it's still, I feel like the step of knowing and then actually being in it the onboarding is a good word, because you have to get people on that ramp to actually go.
Most definitely. And I mean, that's a big part of what I'm trying to do here with Web3 Warriors, and also with Clubhouse. We're with the Dream Conduit, Blockchain Gospel, Neighborhood Jewelry. We've got a few groups that are really just focused on showing how cool the community side is, and then being like, oh yeah, so we're doing this on the blockchain, so you kind of lead with community, lead, like in this case, maybe it's hip hop, maybe it's specific to artists and creators who just want to know more about this NFT space. You lead with that potential and what we have already in the space, and then people want to learn more about like, oh, so you guys are actually like selling NFTs on the blockchain, or you're actually a major collector, and why do you collect art on the blockchain, you know? And then you can explain to them, you know, why you see value in digital art. And not only the art itself, but it's the fact that when you purchase that art, you're directly supporting the artist. I would say even more so than in the traditional art world, unless you're going directly to that artist and buying it, you know, hand to hand from that artist. That's the only, you know, real world art exchange that I think is comparable to digital NFTs and selling your NFTs, because you're getting such a massive share of that exchange, right? Yeah. So it's a really important point to make, I think.
It is.
Yeah, because when it comes to onboarding, it just gets so confusing, because a lot of people are just, there's a lot of misconceptions, unfortunately, you know?
Yeah, and there's always like somebody that's going to do like a Zoom call with me on Monday to learn how to do their art, because I feel like the word is slowly spreading. Even before I did Web3, I was a photographer in the fashion industry, and I have an agent who I had this conversation with. She's like, I'm going to hire somebody to teach me about NFTs. And I'm like, don't pay anybody money. I'll tell you everything for free.
That's just
because it's somebody that's like just being that kind of like, I'm going to take money to explain. It doesn't make any sense. Web3 is constantly shifting and changing. You're going to find so many people willing to onboard you. And I'm like, just let's have lunch. I'll tell you everything you need to know.
Yeah, I got to give Kane credit. His line is, don't pay for directions to the bathroom. That's the perfect summation.
Funny enough, I met Beeple at a party, NFT NYC, asking me for directions in the bathroom, and I guess I lost it. I was like, oh my God, that's Beeple. And I was like, that way. I have no idea. There must have been a bathroom some way there.
So you're lucky hanging out in New York. You get to meet Beeple just on a Thursday, right?
Oh, NFT NYC.
NFT NYC, cool. I want to give a shout out to Cheerleader Reg in the chat. Thank you for joining us and asking a question. Appreciate you. She said, he or she or they said, hi there. How would you describe digital healing becoming one whole wellness healing in the real world through NFT? How would you describe that connection? So how do you think that NFTs have the potential to actually help with whole body healing and wellness?
No, in this case, in what I'm trying to build, the NFTs is just a tool to actually get the conversation started in Web3 as more and more people come in to know about this, and to get funding for something that's not in Web3, for actual people living in real life and going to therapy.
Most definitely. And I would say, you know, there's no limits to the potential of what you can add to your NFT as well, right? As far as the utility. So when you look at that question of, you know, how would a digital NFT allow someone to help with healing and wellness, there's opportunities like what Shilo's saying with their Held collective. You know, you have that opportunity to really plug in and benefit. And I mean, in that case, maybe you don't even have to own the NFT yet, but down the line, if you're purchasing the NFTs from their collection, you know that you're actually helping someone get access to therapy. So that's helping somebody else. But similarly, you could connect actual therapy hours to your NFT to a scenario. Actually, I know someone who's done that, Dr. Lemney. I'll give her a shout out. She's amazing. She's got, you know, actually accreditation and experience in the therapy space. And she offers time as part of her NFTs because she's an artist as well. So that's an example where you could actually attach specific hours of therapy to your artwork when you sell it. So you add that utility. So there's really no limits to, if you want your NFTs to help somebody achieve wellness, just get creative with it, really. What do you think, Shilo?
That's a good point. I feel like my brain goes in a certain linear path because I feel like there's so many creative ways we could do this, and I'm open to all of that. But in the end of the day, the most healing thing is a person giving another person this safe place to be able to heal. And I don't want to like dilute that with all the extra things. All the extra things could help us get there, but in the end of the day, that peer-to-peer or therapist to client working together to heal is just such an important piece.
I love it. And I love that we're calling it peer-to-peer because it is person to person, but in the blockchain context, we're talking peer-to-peer. So that's beautiful. And Cheerleader Reg says, wow, that's pretty awesome. And thank you. No, thank you.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
you being here. And that was a great question. So if you have any others, feel free to ask. And that goes for anybody in the chat. We appreciate you. That's why we're doing this live, help add value to these conversations, you know? On that point, Shilo, I'm seeing this Twitter void, and I have to ask about it because I really like this art piece. Just scrolling through your OpenSea collection now. What are your thoughts on the Twitter void and and then the nonstop Web3 shilling and the Twitter environment in general?
Yeah, so that's part of my on our way home. I think I had to make it finding our way home. I don't remember if I have to like shorten the title on OpenSea or just on my website. But it feels so often like part of it is trying to get your work out there and you're working against the algorithm. Like you're
Mm,
not completely in control of who sees what you're
that's so
tweeting. And
true.
it's like sometimes like tweet, 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 and it's like, does anybody hear me? And it's just to point out that it's not all about just Twitter. You have to have like anybody that responds to my tweets is usually somebody that I had some sort of connection to before. You have to continue to build those connections and to build, I hate the community as in like community, but you have to build that community. And then slowly it adds up to having people actually engage with your tweets in a way that
Yeah, very,
could, bring your message across, whatever it is, if you're trying to sell your NFTs or promote a project or whatever else it is that you're putting out there.
yeah, most definitely. And good point on that algorithm too, because that can mess with people's heads. And it's interesting too, because I noticed they really tighten up the algorithm on videos. And I think it's because they know that the videos will get so much more engagement, so they purposely make it show up for less people. And it's just like, that's so not cool, you know? And it's like, I consider, like, should I pay to promote this so I get it out there? Like, no, that's what they want me to think, you know? Yeah, I don't know. I have a love-hate relationship with Twitter, which is
Yeah.
better than my relationship with the other guys, because I just have a hate-hate relationship with them.
Here, I hear you. I
Yeah.
completely hear you. But even so, like I just want this to be known that when you put a tweet out there and nobody responds to it, you're not alone. There are so many people that feel the same way. Like,
Yeah, most definitely, most definitely. That's why I asked the question, because it's an important point. And the build is really slow. You know, it's kind of a slow build on Twitter. Well, just with any social media, I guess. But I will say, you know, use hashtag NFT community. You know, hashtag Web3. You can plug in a little bit more. You'll get people seeing it. Although you also might attract some bots, but I think it at least helps you narrow your target audience a little bit and get a little bit more traction. I really like your animated pieces on OpenSea here, like this rain, rain. Do I really want you to go away? Do you want to elaborate on that one a little bit? Sorry, I like picking apart art. I hope you don't mind.
I don't mind at all. I guess I was asking myself the question. This was a really fun one to do. It took me a long time, so it's like
Yeah, it
something
looks
that
like it's
almost
a lot
like a
of little
meditative
details.
piece. But it's like sometimes we're so comfortable in our discomfort that do we really want to change? It's so hard to get out of like the patterns, I guess, that we get stuck in. Do we really want the rain to we then have to get used to like the sunshine? I know it's like so metaphorical, but
Philosophical. I like it.
yeah, it feels like a question I need to ask myself sometimes. Yes, I do want to make myself uncomfortable. Anything in like Web3 itself is this new uncomfortable place
Yeah,
to
most
explore.
definitely. And you know, there's that saying, right? You need the rain to get the flowers, right?
But then you have to be able to step out of it and you know
Yeah,
go grow the flowers or enjoy them.
the balance. Don't drown the flowers. I hear you. Very cool, very cool. Yeah, your artwork is really amazing. I definitely recommend everybody to go check out Finding Our Way Home on OpenSea. That's Shilo's collection there. Very, very cool. Yeah, so on the topic of wellness in Web3 and, you know, how, you know, maybe when you look at the kind of more toxic, or I don't even like the word toxic, but I guess the more FOMO focused side of the NFT community and, you know, other people kind of just trying to find their way, what do you think is a healthy way to kind of onboard into NFTs, I guess? Like where do you see, you know, how are you hoping this evolves, I guess is a better question, compared
It's
to the
difficult,
FOMO focus?
right? Really hard to not be, especially if you're trying to make money. And you
Oh,
feel like
sorry, I think your mic cut out a little bit there. It's hard to not be what?
it's hard not to be in the FOMO
Right.
space, right? It's such a big part of it. Like, hey, this is a great new thing, and you can make money on this. It almost becomes like a gambler's place. Like, what can we gamble on, and where's the output to what we're investing in next? It's kind of that high that people could very easily fall into that trap.
Hmm.
And I keep on reminding myself, I'm not here to gamble. I don't have anything extra to gamble with.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
sit on your hands and not get stuck into those loops that keep on calling you. It works for some people. For me, it doesn't. It's just my own personal thing. Like I can't gamble. I can't put myself into these projects because everybody else is doing it, even if I'm going to end up losing out. And it's just like my own boundary that I put with myself.
I respect that boundary, because unfortunately, I hate gambling, like in general. And I don't want to gamble, but I last year definitely got to a point where I realized I was gambling, and it was like I had a real kind of like come to Jesus moment, just kind of like thinking like, am I just gambling? Like, did I just waste my money on these stupid dogs, like these stupid PFPs that like are just not worth the money I spent on them? And yeah, it makes you, I would hope that people come to terms, but I think a lot of people unfortunately don't. They don't step back and be like, hey, I'm gambling. Like, why am I doing this? And it can be, financially detrimental, but I think even just to your mental health, to your point, that FOMO, that feeling, oh, I gotta be here, I gotta be there. Like, I don't want to miss this, I don't want to miss that. And with every one of those actions, there's a gas fee and a actual fee for the NFT attached to it, right? So it's very dangerous if you're not thinking about your own well-being, and especially if you are very much opposed to gambling, because ultimately that's what it comes down to too often.
I feel like if this is my own thing, I keep on telling myself this is just the beginning of something that's just being built now. There's no rush. You just have to keep grinding, just like you're a gamer. You know how sometimes you just have to grind for hours to get what you want, right?
That's it.
You just have to keep pushing the pavement and keep going until you get something built out of it. And I feel like it's a smart way to go. If you're, grabbing whatever it is, maybe you'll make a quick buck and you'll be rich for a little bit, but what's your plan? How do you want to do this in the long term? And really thinking that through, or just keep showing up in whichever way and like letting yourself be led to whatever project resonates with you. There's place for everybody to do that, but it's a process.
Yeah.
We're on it.
And you have to be okay, like you say, with taking the time and grinding it out and making the slow build. Even us here at Web3 Warriors, like there are a lot of things on the list, that I would love to do and probably push out and try to get myself bigger. But for one, I don't want to spend too much money on the promotional side. But for two, self-care is important, and you got to acknowledge your own bandwidth, acknowledge, what you can do in the timeline that you're looking at doing it. And just be active where you can and plug in where you can. And yeah, it's going to take time. But ultimately, if you're confident in what you're building, then it'll work out for you, And most importantly, just find the reward for yourself before you worry about rewarding everybody else.
Oh, respect, man, for every one of those words. That's amazing.
Thanks, Shilo. So I brought up I got to your Shilo.art site, and you have the question on here on your deck, why is therapy funding so important? So I'm just going to read this quickly for our listeners because I think it's a really great point. And anybody can go to Shilo.art to check out, what you've got. Really cool artwork as well. A lot of your interesting portfolio there. So more than 70% of people worldwide experience a traumatic event in their lifetime. Trauma therapy has been researched to help with the lingering and often life-altering effects of trauma. Most therapists experienced in trauma healing and modalities can only be accessed through out-of-network insurance, only available through a workplace policy. Otherwise, the costs need to be paid out of pocket, which can be quite expensive. And an average therapy session by an experienced therapist is roughly $200 or more in the States. And since therapy is needed consistently over a stretch of time, the cost often becomes prohibitive and people just stop going, right? So such important points, I think, there. And I think, a lot of people don't think about it until you're in the throes, and requiring some support. And by that time, unfortunately, it's too late, So I really love what you're doing with the Held Collective here. I'm able to bring up your cool art. And so how's it going just on the progress side? I know you touched on it a little bit, but is there any way that our listeners, for example, can help you out? Is there, what are the next steps? What do you got going on?
Yeah. So first of all, we have a Gitcoin grant up, which means that people could donate to it through there or donate directly to it. But that's still something that we're working on, like the wallet specifically for that. But we raised a nice amount of money from different, like a DAO that gave us a certain amount, and then small contributions. The rest of it was $1, $2, $3, $4 that raised $4,000 towards it. So like funding is probably the biggest piece that we need right now to get
so if you go to Gitcoin, you just look up Held Collective and you can kind of find it listed there, and you can donate $1, $2, however much. Everything helps.
Everything helps. Every little bit makes a difference. They have a matching round that's over now, and the matching round also helps because every dollar that you gave kind of made the funding. It made that pool be a little bit bigger. But even now, every day I got an email. Somebody gave me another $8. Thank you. So
that's amazing.
That's a big part of it, the funding. And then, we're always looking for people that want to be a part of this as a collective in terms of who wants to be in the healing spaces and part of those conversations or part of those art pieces.
So volunteer, there's a volunteer request there too, you're saying?
Yeah. Just to be a part of it. It's not really volunteer, just to be a part of the conversations as in like the collective conversation. Okay. And then we're looking for people to help us and volunteer to build the website or, community management, anybody that wants to like consult or help us build the back end of this is super helpful. I have a bunch of meetings lined up for people like that.
Awesome.
And then anybody who wants to donate NFTs, especially NFTs that speak about healing and trauma and the human condition, is something that resonates with our project. So we're always open to taking donations.
All right, that's perfect. So there's a lot of different ways to plug in there. So you can get on Gitcoin, support them financially. If you're interested in these healing conversations and the healing spaces, you can sign up to join. And I guess they just reach out to you on Twitter to do that.
No, we're on the website. The first thing is going to be like sign up.
Yeah, the main splash page of the website. Okay.
Yeah, but it's not up and running yet, but you could definitely reach out to me until that's up.
Cool. Let me reach out to you, get you to connect through Shilo.art or follow you on Twitter at ShiloArt. You can also see all of her cool artwork that she's got there or that they've got there. Sorry. So when you're looking at Web3 and the specifics of like convincing people who maybe are skeptical, how do you see, have you had any success? Are you trying to convince any of your friends and family as to why it's not a scam, for example, or all the negative side of it, and why you're spending so much time, like you say, you're so busy on your project, plugging in all the time. So yeah, how does that conversation go, and what do you think is a good way to kind of convince people of the value in this space?
So people that I am in touch with that I'm trying to convince all have really valid arguments against me, which I appreciate. Specifically, like my 18-year-old son has so many, like he's a real gamer and a YouTuber, and he has all the arguments, people talking about why Web3 isn't great. So we're constantly getting into these conversations. But my understanding and what I'm telling people is this is here. It's not going anywhere. It's gonna be here forever. I mean, that's my belief. I might be wrong, but that's what I believe. And this is a platform that could be used for whatever you want it to be. It's like we get to shape this and how this looks. We're still building this, and there's a tremendous amount of goodwill in this. In Web3, there's such an amount of goodwill that if you come and join this community, you get to do that with a group of like-minded people that are wanting to build this next phase of technology or next phase of what this world looks like.
Most definitely. The blockchain cannot be destroyed. The only way you're going to lose it is if we lose access to the internet, which would be a much bigger problem, I think. But the technology, especially when looking at Bitcoin and Ethereum, because they are so decentralized and there are so many nodes across the world that, no one group of people can really just shut down the whole thing. At worst, they could devalue the currency quite a bit, but, over time that can still build up. So the tech is not going anywhere. That is For sure. And that's one of the main tenets here at Web3 Warriors that we're trying to emphasize for people, because while there is a lot to criticize, as we've touched on today, there are a lot of maybe not so healthy aspects to the community. There's also a lot of amazing, like you say, goodwill and potential for people to just plug in and do the work that's required, and I think that maybe is a big part of what's preventing people, ultimately from jumping in as well, is because on one hand, you're seeing the people just going to the moon right away and you want to be on that ship. But on the other side, you're seeing people who had maybe been on that quote unquote struggling or starving artist kind of lifestyle that have now been able to find a new audience and a new community and have been not so starving and have been able to actually sell their art for what it's really worth, and not just struggling to be seen by an elite group of people. So I think that's the narrative that we really want to push, and we really want to emphasize for anybody who's new to the space and really trying to learn and kind of plug in more. It's odd though, because I find that especially with artists and some musicians that I've been trying to pull into Web3, they just don't want to necessarily care about the community. And it seems like that is actually a requisite, and I've realized that at first I didn't think that was necessarily the case. And maybe if you come in with your own, fans and you have a lot of groundwork done already, maybe you don't have to worry about plugging in as much with the existing Web3 community. But I'm shocked by the amount of people who see that as work, instead of seeing it as like a fun kind of collaborative thing to do, not to mention sell your art, because these people are going to be your collectors and your supporters. But they really see just doing that, just hanging out with us and being part of the community as too much work. Have you found that?
No, I feel like then they're hanging out with the wrong people.
Right. Exactly.
If it feels like the conversation is work and it's not fun, then go find people that are.
I like it.
There's enough.
Exactly. There's so many conversations. They just haven't found the right group, right? That's all it is.
Yeah. Though I do want to say it is work, but so is getting an agent and putting your work out into galleries and getting paid. It's work.
Exactly.
Anything is work, but you're getting to work in this fun, new, opportunity-driven space.
Yeah. And to your point, I mean, it depends on the amount of work you want to put in, right? Like if an artist who's got amazing artwork just wants to put their art on OpenSea with the OpenSea contract, all you're really doing is uploading it onto the blockchain, essentially minting it on the blockchain. And it doesn't require too much, but even then you're still going to want to plug in on Twitter. You're going to want to show that you exist, and so just putting it on OpenSea is not going to be enough. But then there's the next layer of doing like what you're doing or what we're trying to do here with Web3 Warriors, what the Dream Conduit's trying to build, or that they are actively building, Blockchain Gospel. Those kind of projects, with like yours with the Held Collective, take a lot of time and a lot of intention, right? Like you have to have clear intentionality of like, what is it I'm doing and why am I doing it? And you have to be okay with not having a quick meteoric rise, Yeah. And do you think that, there's going to be, I guess, how do you envision, that growing, as far as like these micro communities, like a year from now, how would you like to see the Held Collective doing work?
So I actually have people that I'm talking to that are so amazing at figuring out the scaling piece, because it's a big piece. How do you scale something so that it stays small enough that you can manage it, but big enough to reach the amount of people you want to? And there's ways to do that in terms of making the Held Collective be a certain size. And if it gets too big, creating other Held Collectives, like the different bases of Held Collectives that could kind of like fork the method that we're using, have access to maybe the big pool of funding, but have the group of people be smaller. So there's a lot of ideas of how that scaling is going to look. That's part of our roadmap right now.
That's really cool.
Yeah, because it is. I have this vision that at some point everybody's going to have to come through Web3, and when that happens, and anybody in that space is like, I need therapy, Held Collective, it should be a household word of people that know, okay, this is where I could get help. Even maybe something that the government knows about and back, so that people could just have access to the therapy they need eventually. I also don't want to run this forever. So I really want to make this into something that's self-sustaining and could be kind of a model that any social good project could use of how this could be built in a way that could be then driven by the community itself,
Okay.
by putting all the pieces in place so that it could continue to grow and go in the way that it needs to go.
So that brings up the DAO question. I don't assume you're not looking to build a DAO with it, are you? Or possibly? That would be a decentralized autonomous organization for anybody not familiar listening. DAO, DAO, is a very Web3 form of organization, and it's very much focused on how you build your community and allowing everybody in your community to have a voice. It doesn't mean that there's not a board of directors, for example, or certain, leadership teams, but there's much more acknowledgement of the collective, and it is a decentralized, autonomous organization, which ideally everyone within your organization has quite a bit of autonomy, and it's decentralized because, if everyone's kind of spread out and has their vote and their voice,
It's just like the DAOs are something I called it the Health Collective, because collective essentially is something that has been done for a really long time in so many industries, and they're essentially the first DAOs, right?
Right.
Of any kind of a collective where it's everybody doing it together. But I didn't officially make it into a DAO yet because I feel like I still need to find people that are invested enough to stay in it.
No doubt.
So it's a process, but that's
and I think it's good to treat it as a project first, but be open to that, that growth, right? Going back to your roadmap question. That was really interesting, that line about being small enough to manage, but large enough to have impact, right? And resonate. And I think that is kind of the constant balance. And too many people lean more into just wanting to grow and be as large as possible. And then they can't manage it, or they fail to perform or fail to provide what they were promising everybody and how they got everybody in the door. Then they realize, oh, actually we can't do that. Now you got a lot of angry people on your hands instead of doing.
There's you're making me think if there's a way for communities like that to scale it to, I don't know, mutant apes 0.1, 0.2, 0.3,
Right.
so that people still have that sense of community instead of it being something that's so big and then they could be part of, like, plugged into a bigger community. It's just something people should think about. Like, there's no rules of how this has to be. I feel like sometimes people in Web3 forget there is no rules there.
And we're making it as we go, right? We're building it as we go. But to your point, I think it's about putting the hard part first, and that will hopefully help you avoid those hangups later down the road if you've grown too fast and then you don't have the bandwidth or even just the ability to provide, what you were promising. So better off, do the slow foundational work first, build within a smaller group, a smaller community, and then you can be confident about what it is you're offering, Awesome. All right. Well, Shilo, I think we've touched on a lot of awesome conversation here. I know I don't want to take up your whole day, and I could talk Web3 all day as always. Before we wrap, did you have any final questions or comments, thoughts on the conversation, Web3 and wellness?
No, this was an awesome conversation. Fun and informative. Cool.
I'm glad you found it informative. We're always trying to have a conversation that, like, I definitely learned a lot. I think you learned a little bit, and then hopefully the listeners are learning as well, Yeah, that's what it's all about. So thank you, Shilo. I appreciate you. I don't think we have any final questions from the chat. Appreciate everybody who joined in the chat. Cheerleader Reg, we got a little gift for you for that amazing question. So I appreciate you. We'll touch base. Shilo, thanks again for joining us. That's episode 14 of Web3 Warriors, and we will catch you in the metaverse.